perhaps one of the greatest pleasures for anyone who knows and understands drawing is to unexpectedly come across a work by another artist that unfolds before their eyes and, while revealing all its beauty, surprises them. The kind of moment I'm describing occurs when we see a work of art in real life and are able to examine and scrutinise its surface, discover subtle qualities that are lost during the transference from real object to digital reproduction, and put ourselves in the position of the artist at the exact moment when he was making the drawing. Having the real thing in front of you is like having a personal conversation with the artist. You're able to spend time exploring every aspect of the drawing, an activity which is the visual equivalent of truly listening to someone in order to understand what they are saying. The following essay emerged after such an experience. I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. The second I looked at it, I became hooked and transfixed by its magic. Writing about it allowed me to crystallise my thoughts and pin down exactly what it was that spoke to me so clearly. The drawing I saw was this study of a nude by the French artist Georges Seurat. It belongs to the collection of prints and drawings at the Courtauld Institute in London, and about a year ago it went on show as part of a temporary display of works on paper. Its sheer power dominated the room it was in. From across a room it appears to be a skillful, tonal drawing of a young woman, shrouded by darkness. Yet close up, the way in which it is executed goes against what you would expect. As you can see from these details of the drawn surface, the image comes together from a delicate accumulation of wandering lines that follow no outline or feature. The illusion is quite uncanny. From far away the rendering is convincing, yet the closer you get, the more the image disappears. All you're left with is a mesh of lines. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to anchor the features of the face. There are no boundaries between body and surrounding space. The lines flow in and out of the form. The effect of such a technique is part of the reason for my fascination with this drawing. It has a strange power to draw you in, while not revealing its mystery. The longer you look at it, the stranger it becomes. The more I thought about Seurat's nude, the more I realised that there were other ideas contained within the drawing. On a basic level, it's a drawing of a figure, but it quickly becomes apparent how important the surrounding space is in making her feel real. In fact, the drawing seems just as much about the space she occupies as it is about her form. Seurat has given every part of the sheet of paper the same importance. Such a treatment of the surface gives a solidity and permanence, and seems to hint at forces greater than the incidental fact of a model being present in a room, and the dark space in which she exists imbues the work with a quality that stays with you long after you have seen it. Aspects such as these got me very interested in the work of Seurat, and through looking at other original drawings by him, I began to understand that my interest, although sparked by his technique, lay in the concepts and ideas contained within his way of working. Seurat died when he was only 31, but during his brief career he produced great paintings, often on a vast scale. However, it is in his drawings that we feel closest to the artist himself, someone who thought long and hard, not only about technical problems, but about the relevance of art to contemporary life, and in the process created some of the most extraordinary and singular drawings in existence. The emergence of his distinct style happened very precociously. If the dating of the nude is correct, the Courtauld dates it as 1879 to 1881, then Seurat was between 20 and 22 years of age when he did this drawing. We now know that his transition from an academic way of drawing to his mature style happened in the period between the ages of 20 and 24. No sooner had he left art school Then, determined to say something truly original, he set about developing a technique of his own invention, something unlike anything seen before in art. He spent a year in Brest doing his military service. The sketchbooks from the time show a young student relinquishing his showy academic style in order to grapple with subject matter that presented itself to him. The sketches show a keen interest in life and a tremendous sense of empathy in portraying people. What is remarkable is that sometimes among these pages one can glimpse characters that appear 3 years later in his paintings. The daily practice of drawing only became more accentuated once he returned to Paris the following year, and for 3 years he spent all of his time drawing. In fact, his friends used to say Seurat was obsessed with drawing. He seemed to be desperately searching for a distinctive style, something that would set him apart from everybody else. Because many of his drawings from this period have survived, we can see how his development unfolded. These 3 drawings are good examples of his progress. For a brief period, he employed diagonal strokes until they filled the picture space. Gradually, this way of making marks gave way to a more mysterious, less abruptly accented procedure that eventually led to his mature style, a distilled form of perfection. In the drawings, we're no longer conscious of individual pencil marks, but merely a process of uninterrupted becoming. When I visited the Prints and Drawing study room at the British Museum to view the 5 drawings by Seurat in their collection, I could see that from a drawing like this, Seurat decided that drawing a figure using outlines wasn't enough. Perhaps a need to capture the strangeness of the world was what guided him. He became absorbed in contemplating the mysterious light and shadow that articulates forms, or a moment in time. In this linear to tonal shift, what is most striking is the sheer luminosity that is achieved through a distinctive use of Conte crayon on paper. The luminosity reaches even more potency when you realise the light is actually the white paper showing through the strokes of crayon, and it appears as though this was achieved by simply accumulating marks, which shows he had a clear idea of what had to remain unmarked to create the luminous effect. As you marvel at the drawings, you are struck by the simplicity of conception and the complexity of execution. Although he builds up a mesh of lines, there is no line in principle. A form exists only in relation to and is defined by what it is next to. This distinguishing feature allows for an expanded concept of drawing. The figures seem to exist in the air, in the stuff that surrounds them, yet it becomes hard to define the space in which they exist. Paraphrasing what Virginia Woolf said much later, the image emerges from the chaos of consciousness, a kind of whole made of shivering fragments. The mind receives a myriad of impressions. From all sides they come, an incessant shower of innumerable atoms. Let us record the atoms as they fall upon the mind in the order in which they fall. Let us trace the pattern, however disconnected and incoherent in appearance, which each sight or incident scores upon the consciousness. This passage is illuminating in regards to Seurat's practice, since it speaks both of physical matter and conscious feeling. Woolf's passage acts as an invitation to the modern artist to record the physicality of life as it affects the spirit. Any artist wrestling with such a problem needs to employ his or her medium, whether they be words or paint, to such an effect. Seeing the originals made me understand Seurat's extraordinary tactile sensitivity in the act of drawing. Again and again, each drawing shows an astounding sensitivity and care in the placement of marks. Through the evocative use of economical line, luxurious blacks, and meaningful oppositions of light and dark, Seurat worked tirelessly towards perfecting his technique in order to create material equivalents for sensory experiences. His practice of letting his pictures emerge practically on their own in a dense accretion of marks gives an intensity that becomes more powerful the more it is restrained. While developing his method, Seurat took from a varied range of sources in an entirely unprejudiced manner. He drew from popular poster images, Egyptian art, and writers such as Émile Zola. He learnt from Piero della Francesca, Holbein, Ingres, drew inspiration from shadow plays popular in the 1880s, and from the lithographs of Henri Fantin-Latour. Most of these examples would have shown him how to simplify an image and give it an abrupt, monumental quality. In his own work, motifs began to emerge: solitary figures, tree trunks, itinerant entertainers. What he took from others, he digested and reworked to suit his own ambitions. An example of how he did this can be offered by his interpretation of both Millet and Puvis de Chavannes. The latter influenced Seurat directly. We know that Seurat and Signac visited his studio when they were in their early 20s. Here, Seurat would have had a chance to witness firsthand how Puvis would stretch canvas onto the wall, all the way up to the ceiling and down to the floor, an experience that undoubtedly helped him conceive how to set about making large paintings later. At the time, Puvis was well known for his painting Du Pays, a hushed and still painting of Arcadia, without any indication as to what was happening in France at that time. Seurat, on the other hand, wanted to do both: create an image of the present day, with all the monumentality present in the works he admired. This is what drew him to the work of Millet, who had found a way of integrating his feeling for the antique into an interpretation of what was actually going on in the France of his day, bestowing timeless grandeur on everyday events. In an attempt to understand how he had achieved this, Seurat copied sections freely, deriving some of his images directly from Millet. Here, for example, he has extracted single elements that Millet had used as part of a full-scale composition, as if to see how far he could confer dignity and awe on individual incidents of country life. Yet, most of Seurat's research was conducted drawing from life. He isolated single entities. In the countryside he drew haystacks and made them monumental. From this period, two themes predominate: the iconography of vigorous action and the iconography of immobility. Something that does become apparent is that Seurat was equally as interested in the ardours and virtues of labour, a theme with political implications, as he was in composition and in the balance of light and dark. His drawings often led to great paintings, but there is an even stronger link between his drawings and painting practice, since it seems his divisionist painting technique was derived directly from his way of drawing, and in particular from the paper he was using. Seurat used a variety of Ingres paper called Michelle. In his sketchbook here we can see a sticker from his paper supplier. In making his drawings, Seurat used the texture of the paper to his advantage, exploiting the uneven surface to create light. As he moved into painting, he created equivalents for this effect. In his small oil sketches on wood panels, known as croquetons, he distressed the wood using a knife so that the surface was rich in irregularities. Seurat was fond of these small paintings and kept them in his studio, and no doubt they were crucial in the editing process that led to the large canvases. We can see how the choice of applying luminous colours and creating juxtapositions amongst them was also an attempt to achieve the same luminosity that is the distinguishing feature of his works on paper. Seurat achieved his wish to create a monumental image of contemporary Paris in his first great masterpiece, Une bagnade à Asnières, 1884. Seurat was 25. A canvas rich in references to art history. We can see compositional similarities in the white sail on the horizon and the disposition of seated and reclining figures that he took from Puvis, and the young male figure with his knees up, taken from Piero della Francesca. An analysis of this painting would not be complete without taking into account the fact that Seurat also painted another canvas, called A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, 1884, which he intended to be placed beside it. The canvases are the same size. As a diptych, these two works inform one another and offer further possibilities and interpretations. A small boat flying the French flag is present in both canvases, a sign that here is a clever mind at work, one that is giving clues to the viewer about the relationship between these two separate crowds, a meaning which may have been more apparent to his contemporaries than it is to us. Important clues are hidden in the titles of these paintings. The first reveals the location, Asnières, and the second, the date, 1884. They reveal the artist's wish to locate these mysterious events, strange frieze-like processions, in a real time and place. La Grande Jatte is an island on the Seine, which at the time was experiencing a strange transition, and, for Seurat, became a sort of emblem of the changing face of the landscape. In the 1880s, it had become part of the suburb of Paris, neither countryside nor city. Seurat had explored the theme of the banlieue, suburb, in various drawings that capture a mood which reappears 70 years later in the work of Giacometti. Giacometti had a similar habit of wandering through the city, making notes of what he saw, culminating in his series Paris sans fin, Paris without end. This drawing is just one of the many that Seurat made on the island, yet both the drawings and the paintings are far from documents of what was happening at the time. As these photos show, in reality, La Grande Jatte was the site of chaos and mayhem most Sundays, quite the opposite of the stillness Seurat painted. Photos as well as magazines from the time show a time of excitement, with crowds pouring in and out of boats. How should an artist put down such chaotic events in paint? Seurat's answer is something I find truly fascinating. It seems as if his ambition was to extract harmony and equilibrium from everyday life. It seems to me as if he produced order from chaos, the eternal from the fugitive, an ideal proportion from a scene which, in life, would have tugged all ways at once. His profound historical sense was another aspect that set him apart from his contemporaries. In his work, we see time and again the eternal and immutable values that Baudelaire, in 1863, had declared to be half of art. The other half now consisted of the characteristics of modern life: the transitory, the fugitive, the contingent. Before modernity can be worthy to turn into antiquity, the artist must extract from it that mysterious beauty which human life puts into it involuntarily. Seurat took the involuntary and, through organised will, transformed it into one of the ingredients of high art. His works have political undercurrents, yet what he was aiming for above all was much more powerful and timeless. We now live in a world that is very different from the one Seurat was operating in. Yet we can still understand his view of human beings. Our society has fabricated spectators and transgressors of spaces, millions of people who show no need to know each other, places of laziness or thoughtfulness. What power can drawing have to say something about the world we find ourselves in now? My own interest in observing life has been fuelled by Seurat's approach. Over the last few months, his work has been a rich source of thought, shedding light on persistent concerns of mine. How to move beyond the immediate subject to show something seen and clearly felt. Using simple ideas to create complex outcomes. Asking questions about the nature of human interaction. What it means to draw another human being. How does giving a time and place to a drawing affect its meaning? Seurat always maintained that all he was interested in was technique. Although this may have been the case, I believe that simply by looking at his work and comparing it to that of others who imitated his style, one can see that his drawings have something that is lacking in his imitators. Whatever Seurat decided to draw, he brought to the work his profound feeling for the world and what he saw. Although incredibly exacting, his drawings show no sign of being forced in any way. In fact, quite the opposite. He combined the most rigorous formal investigation with a way of drawing that is consummately poetical. Everything appears right in front of us, yet appears impossibly remote. Seurat's technical procedure was, as his close friend and art critic Gustav Kahn said, not simply the very essence of his art, but the entire revelation of his intelligence. The final effect seems to be incredibly close to the way memory works. When all particulars have deserted our mind, all we are left with is a distinct feeling. In his use of line and tone, he found a way of making the fleeting permanent, and revealed drawing's ability to preserve a moment. The terrifyingly beautiful and inescapable fact of life is that each moment comes and is gone immediately. Yet, in his drawings everything appears locked in the moment, as if preserved, intact. The very activity of drawing becomes an act of defiance against entropy, making up for the way things are. Indeed, Seurat's effort in marking the whole surface can be read as an attempt at holding on to the world, and in the face of the impossibility of such a task, create an equivalent, making each moment seen last forever.